Story 1. In my mother tongue, this sounds better. When you try to tell him it's his fault and it's not, he says, "Don't try to put your fart in my ass." Story 2. Mom. "Come on, Granny grunt. Step on it," she said while driving angrily with us in the back seat. Dad. He massaged the top of my head and said, "What's this?" Me. "I don't know, Dad." Dad. "It's a brain sucker. And what's it doing?" Me. "I don't know, Dad." Dad. "It's starving." I rolled my eyes. Dad laughed. Story 3. You can one in one hand and shit in the other, and see which one fills up the fastest. That was the response I got when asking for items at the store. Story 4. Want to make God laugh? Tell him your plans. My mother used to say that all the time. Story 5. It is yogurt. What is it going to do go bad? It is a couple of days past its expiration date. They also said that watching too much television would give me square eyes. Story 6. It was not my parents but my grandmother. Whenever she saw us looking hungover or knew we had been to a party, she would say, "Ah, look at you, you dirty stay-outs," in a joking, loving way. I say that to my cats now when they do not come in at night and then pop up for breakfast. Story 7. If you can't do it right, don't do it at all. Set me up with a lifelong habit of procrastination. Story 8. My dad has been gone for 4 years now, and I would pay a king's ransom to call him and hear him pick up the phone and say, "Hey kiddo, what's happening?" I never realized until after he was gone that he never said it to anyone but me. Story 9. My dad would yell shit or get off the pot when someone was driving slowly. Story 10. Because I said so. No explanation, no reasoning. Just pure parental authority. I swore I'd never say it. Guess who says it now? Story 11. I'm not trying to cool the whole neighborhood. Whenever we would have the door open for more than a few seconds, I would laugh out loud. Story 12. Once, when I was complaining about something, my grandmother said out of nowhere, "Before you complain about anything again, remember, your life would be worse if you were a person with dwarfism." In times of struggle and hardship, that statement always comes to mind. Thank you, Grandma. Story 13. My dad was from the Ozarks. When we did something fancy, he would say, "We're farting through silk." I miss him. Story 14. My parents always said, "You won't understand what we say until you have kids of your own." I don't have kids yet, but I now understand some of the things they used to say when I was younger. Story 15. Deaf in one ear, can't hear out the other. Blind in one eye, can't see out the other. Quit crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Don't ever start a fight, but always finish one. Don't know shit from shampoo. Shit in one hand, wish in the other. See which one fills up faster. Story 16. You would forget your head if it were not attached. Were you raised in a barn? Said when the front door is left open. You make a better door than a window. Said when someone stands in front of the television. Story 17. When my dad found something shocking, he would say, "Well, I'll go to Cardiff." He still said it when we lived in Cardiff. I'll always remember that. Story 18. You get what you get and you do not throw a fit. Mind your own business. Story 19. Act your age. My parents' favorite go-to phrase when they accuse me of not being manly and of being a fucking emotionless robot. As a manly man who barely won a fistfight against a bear, I believe I have more say than two boomer idiots about what is considered manly. I say having emotions is manly, empathizing is manly, enjoying a romantic comedy is manly, and enjoying a nice hot bubble bath is extra manly. I have more, but I'm saving it for Thanksgiving. Story 20. My father was planning to marry his second wife. He did not have enough money for the marriage license, so he asked his father, my grandfather. My grandfather sent $56 with a note that read, "Life is a living hell." He did not get married after that, but we still use the phrase often. Story 21. My dad always says, "You can pick your friends, but you cannot pick your parents." Story 22. The letter Y has a long tail. When I was young, I thought that explained it. Story 23. Do not answer the phone or the door. Stir the beans. Story 24. My mother said she was sick of gay people pushing their agenda onto Catholics like us. She ended up with a lesbian daughter. How convenient. She is not homophobic, though. She supports me, sort of. Story 25. You don't know shit from Shinola. I loved that phrase, even though I didn't know what Shinola was. Story 26. Why can't you just be like your brother? Apparently, he's perfect, and I was hired to test their patience. Story 27. I'll give you something to cry about. I brought you into this world. I can take you out. I don't talk to them anymore. Story 28. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other meant the same thing to my father. Story 29. If you start a fight, you will have to deal with me. If someone starts a fight with you, you should end it. I may have lost 2 or 3 fights between middle school and high school out of about 50, mainly because I knew that if I lost, others would jump in. Story 30. Ever since I was a kid, every time I leave my parents' house, my mother sees me out by saying, "Watch the ice." She says it regardless of the weather or season. It is her way of saying, "Take care," I guess. The last time my family visited, she said it as we were leaving. My 10-year-old was confused and asked, "Why would Nana say that?" "It's August." My 15-year-old replied, "Nana always says that. It's her thing." Story 31. Ah well, you can't take a pair of trousers off a bare arse. Story 32. We told you so is said when something happens that someone predicted. Story 33. Because I said so. The original mic drop before you even knew what arguing was. Story 34. No kidding, Dick Tracy. Where did you park your squad car? I said, stating the obvious. Story 35. An elephant for a quarter is only a good deal if you need it and have a quarter. Story 36. Would candy make it feel better? Sniff. Yeah. Then it doesn't really hurt that bad. Does it? Story 37. My dad is still a huge fan of holy mackerel. Story 38. For Pete's sake. Like, who the hell is Pete? Why do we do everything for him? Story 39. I'm sorry, he said, reaching over the front seat. You should be. Story 40. My dad told my brothers and me to eat the crust off the bread and the unwanted vegetables because he said it would put hair on our chests. I am female. He smiled as he spoke. I think he was being funny. Story 41. The maid died yesterday. Her funeral is tomorrow. Translation. Clean up after yourself for fuck's sake. Story 42. It's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Story 43. If you get smacked on the back while making that face, your face will get stuck like that, Mom said. Story 44. When an ambulance passes with its sirens on, people say they will not sell many ice creams going at that speed. Story 45. It may not be your fault, but it is still your responsibility. This usually resulted from my complaints about a teacher. Story 46. My parents said money does not grow on trees whenever I asked for anything. I still hear it in my head whenever I am about to buy something I do not need. Story 47. It is not so much a phrase as a word. It comes from my grandfather on my mother's side. When I look for the remote control for the television, I ask where is the knob because old televisions had a knob that you had to get up to change the channel. My wife was confused, but I would say the knob turns things and the remote changes the channels on the television. I equate it now to when I use my phone to record a video. I might say I taped it like we used to do on videocassettes from shoulder-supported video cameras. I am a millennial with baby boomer parents. Story 48. My grandma always used to say, waste not, want not. I never really got it as a kid, but now that I'm older, it clicks. She grew up during the Depression, so it makes a lot more sense why she lived that way. Story 49. My grandfather loved the saying, don't let anybody piss on your head and tell you it's raining. Story 50. In hindsight, your mother and I should not have had children. Story 51. Whatever, my foot. Video games, my foot. Story 52. When my dad didn't care about something, he didn't give a rat's ass. When he talked about throwing something in the trash, he would say shit can it. I don't know. I always found these phrases extremely vulgar. He didn't curb his tongue around small children. Story 53. My mum used to throw her hands up to the sky and scream, "Oh God." Give me strength to handle this child. Story 54. Mom used to say you don't have to like everyone, but you have to get along with everyone. Story 55. Not sure where this originally came from, but if you are early, you are on time. If you are on time, you are late. If you are late, that is unacceptable. This is about time management and being punctual. If traffic is getting worse, leave earlier. If an appointment is at 3 o'clock and travel takes 20 minutes, leave at 2:30 to be safe. I have not been late for anything in my adult years. Story 56. Do not stand with the front door open. What are you trying to air condition the neighborhood? Story 57. My dad used to say, walk it off, no matter the injury or the place. He passed almost a year ago, but whenever it gets hard, I hear him say, walk it off, and I try again. Story 58. Someone who is nice to you but rude to a waiter is not a nice person. My dad said this. I have found this to be 100% accurate. Story 59. You need to fix your attitude. Otherwise, no one is going to stay with you for long. Story 60. You can pick your friends and your nose, but you cannot pick your friend's nose. Story 61. Now you eat or you cry and eat. There is no silver spoon here. Story 62. Half man, half mattress. My father said when I wouldn't get out of bed. Story 63. My line was to tell someone to get out of the bathroom because 6 of us shared a single bathroom. Hard to believe in this day and age. Story 64. Don't give me that go to hell look. My resting bitch face has been getting me in trouble since childhood. Story 65. If you do not become better, you will never have better. Not my parents, but my great-grandmother. Story 66. Raised by my grandparents, my grandfather's favorite saying was, if anyone was helping him and did anything wrong, he'd say, you're as awkward as a new whore. Story 67. Eat everything on your plate. There are starving children in Africa. Story 68. If I asked where a family member was, Dad would say, he went mad and the police shot him. Story 69. Raising pigs for beef is an idiom meaning trying to achieve a result by the wrong means. Story 70. Dad. Let it roll off your back like a duck. It gives me good advice to this day. Mom. Kiddo, I despise that phrase entirely. Story 71. Because I said so is simple, terrifying, and somehow stole makes sense 20 years later. Story 72. If you don't eat your dinner, you may become thin and bony and risk dying. Story 73. Because I said so. My parents' ultimate Uno reverse card. Story 74. When my mom asked what we wanted to eat, she would offer suggestions and then say, do you want to poke in the nose with a sharp stick? I do the same to my kids now. I have no idea why. Story 75. You're what hurts? Anytime my sister or I complained about a bump, bruise, ache, or pain, that was the reply. Not for emergencies like someone bleeding profusely, just the small things. To shut down a lot of complaining. Story 76. When in doubt, throw it out. This usually refers to food items. Story 77. While sitting there with my mouth agape, close your mouth. Your shit is getting cold. Story 78. My mom always says, when you assume, you make an ass of you and me. Story 79. I will give you something to cry about after whooping my ass with a belt. Story 80. My mom. You don't know how the world works. My dad. How much for the kitty in the window? He sings while my cat stares at the birds. Laughing out loud. Story 81. As a joke while cleaning up after a hard day's work, my dad would comb his hair in front of the mirror and say that he wished he had been born rich instead of so darn good-looking. We all laughed, including my parents. I miss them both. Story 82. Keep your head on a swivel and don't block the passageway, my dad said. He was a career Navy man who served mostly on aircraft carriers. Story 83. If you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. I don't talk much. Story 84. I'm late to this post, but my grandpa built and loved driving hot rods. When he took us kids for a ride as we approached a hill, he would tell us to lift our feet so we could go down the hill faster, which made us laugh. I miss him so much. Story 85. I'll give you something to cry about. It goes in one ear and out the other. I put you into this world. I can take you out of it. Yes, I had that childhood. Laughing out loud. Story 86. A lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. A place for everything and everything in its place, but only for me. I do not impose my obsessive-compulsive disorder on my children. Story 87. Great Depression-era parents always said, use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. Story 88. The lowest thing on earth is a liar, a cheat, and a thief. She proved herself to be quite the hypocrite over the course of my childhood. Story 89. It looks like Blackpool's bleeding illuminations in here. What's for tea? Shit with sugar. Story 90. My dad always said, I feel more like I do now than I did a few minutes ago. Story 91. I liked the work I was doing. I just didn't like who I was doing it for. My dad was repeatedly laid off and relied on unemployment benefits. If not for the union and the Department of Veterans Affairs, he would have died homeless. Story 92. Oh dear, bread and beer. If I hadn't been born, I wouldn't be here. Story 93. Decide or get off the pot. I consider myself a fairly decisive person. I weigh options but decide quickly. I've always wondered whether part of that comes from being raised in an environment that offered no patience. Story 94. Shit in one hand and wish in the other. See which fills up faster. Story 95. My mother always called bad drivers in traffic half-asses, and I still use the term. Story 96. At the time, figure it out was annoying as hell. Now, though, it makes sense. Story 97. My mom liked to call people clown heads as an insult instead of just calling them clowns. I have carried on that legacy and often receive puzzled looks. Story 98. When I was a boy, I said, that's not fair. Mum replied, life's not fair. I use that line all the time. Story 99. I will give you what you were talking about in a minute. Story 100. You've chosen a hard road. My mom used to say that after she had finished uttering the most abhorrent transphobic things to my face in public. She seriously thought those 5 words just made her immune to being called an abuser. Story 101. My mother used to say, finish your food. There are children starving in Africa. Even as a child, that statement sounded dumb to me, yet I think of those words when I have food left on my plate. Story 102. Someone said God punished you after I fell down the stairs or suffered another accidental injury. Why would God punish an 8-year-old anyway? Story 103. God punished you. Apparently God punishes a lot. You stub your toe, bruise your arm, scrape your knee, and so on. I never knew why I was being punished so much as an 8-year-old. Story 104. Some people say there are starving children in India who would eat it. I am pretty sure they would not, but it is hard to argue. Story 105. I have no idea if this was an Italian thing or regional, but my dad and others would say, and goodbye Charlie. The word and meant that is that or that it is a lost cause. It was always barely preceded by 2 open hand swipes. Any information would be appreciated. Did they get that from some film about the Korean War? Story 106. If I didn't tell you, no one would. This was usually said after someone had commented hurtfully on my appearance, my voice, or something similar. It took me many years to realize those people were shallow and lacked empathy, and that loved ones should not say hurtful things to each other. Parents often justified their comments by saying, I can say it because you know I love you. Story 107. If we knew you were going to have autism, we would have aborted you. I hate that quote, but I still remember it. Story 108. When my sisters and I argued and tattled to her, my mom would say things like, that sounds like 2 cheeks of the same ass and group to dupa. I do not care. Figure it out yourselves. Story 109. I played a lot of sports. When we faced great teams, my dad would say, they put their pants on the same way you do. Story 110. I wouldn't shit you. You're my favorite turd. My mom's favorite thing to say when we fell, had a minor bicycle wreck, or hurt ourselves and started crying was, it's too far away from your heart to kill you. Story 111. When I was a much younger parent, I used to tell my children that they were going to bed because I was tired. Story 112. This too shall pass reminds me to savor the good and that the bad won't last forever. Story 113. No one wants to be friends with a little girl who never smiles. Story 114. Stop that crying or I will give you something to really cry about. It sticks in my head like a tumor and makes me afraid of crying. Story 115. Give me my boots, because the shit is getting thick. Wipes forehead. Do I have stupid on my forehead? You cannot bullshit a bullshitter. Story 116. Not me, but I used to work with a guy from the southern United States who would quote his father in a beautiful southern drawl whenever he wanted me to help him prepare for something, typically researching for a client meeting or helping write a speech. As his father used to say, "You hold this horse and I'll fuck it." Story 117. Not my parents, but my grandpa to my grandma. He said, "You know what, Patsy? I think you are half Indian and half bulldog." She said, "Now just what in the hell is that supposed to mean, Gilbert?" He said, "Because when you are not on the warpath, you are sitting on your ass growling at me." They were together for 40 years. Story 118, context. Me, Mom, what's for dinner? Mom, shit with sugar. Me again? Story 119. My father had one basic rule for driving. Keep the shiny side up. Story 120. If you wanted something to indicate you would not get it, my grandfather would say you may want horns, but you're going to die but head. Story 121. Go play in traffic, Mom said when we repeatedly annoyed her. Story 122. Eat your dinner. Children in some countries are starving. Story 123. If someone tried to one-up my grandmother, she has a spicy mouth. No one teaches me how to suck fucking eggs. It makes me laugh every time. Story 124. Dad said you get what you pay for. I will always remember that and apply it to everything in my life. Story 125. My dad was truly the best girl dad. If we ever expressed a wish, he'd say, "It's great to want things. How will you work to achieve this?" If he was teasing us about something extravagant, he'd laugh and say, "You wish I loved you that much." From sneakers and school clothes to cars, he taught us to work and achieve our goals. He was our finest protector and biggest cheerleader. I also loved when he quoted the Three Stooges. We watched them together all the time. I'm a victim of circumstance. Spread out. Story 126. My mom screamed, "Do I have to learn from you?" I told her to speak normally, as if shouting would make her statement more convincing. Story 127. Whenever my dad needed us to walk faster, he'd say, "Come on, pick them up and put them down." His mom would always say at the dinner table, "There's just a little bit left in this serving bowl. If everyone takes a little bit, it will be gone." That's a fun one to pull out at Thanksgiving when there are 6 of us and an 18-pound bird. Story 128. That and a quarter. Usually the unsaid continuation was, "That and a quarter will get you a phone call or a cup of coffee," depending on her mood. It means your apology and a quarter are worth only a quarter. Said when I apologized for something I was probably just going to do again. Story 129. My dad would say, "I know you better than you know yourself," which drove me up the wall and made me want to hurt myself. I was the family scapegoat and he gaslit me constantly. Story 130. In the words of my mother, people don't forget. Don't do things that make you look bad. Story 131. When I'd say I wanted something, my ma would say, "And people in hell want ice water." To this day, it is my favorite thing to say. Story 132. My grandmother used to say dogs while playing bingo when there was a run of lousy callouts. She was born in the United States to very German parents and picked up the Milwaukee accent, so it sounded more like do eggs. Now I say that whenever I get home from work and take my boots off. Story 133. It is a common saying. People used to say it's 6 of one and a half dozen of the other to describe two choices with similar outcomes. If I say this in the United States now, not many people understand it. My stepdad uses many phrases, such as, "You would have more chance plating fog," "I would not trust you with a bonny dog," "You have more chance of getting a kiss off the Pope," and "You can pick your window." said to someone who has offended him to suggest they can choose where they are defenestrated from. He also says, you are as much use as a chocolate fireguard. I have always heard teapot from others, but my stepdad says, fireguard. When he is surprised, he says, give us a bag of Tudor, which is a brand of crisps or potato chips. Story 134. It is a Portuguese phrase translated into English. Whenever I asked my mom if she knew something she thought was stupid, she would say, I do not know. I do not want to know. And I hate anyone who does know. At the last part, she would pause and look at me until we said it together. Story 135. I'll give you something to cry about. I never said that to my kids. Story 136. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. And I love you, but I don't like you very much right now. My mom said when I had fucked something up. It's like a dagger to the heart every time I think of it. Story 137. Whenever we kids balked at taking a bath or washing dishes because of an injury, for example saying I can't take a bath because I skinned my knee and don't want to get it wet, my mom would say that hot, soapy water is the best thing for it. With 7 children, it happened often enough that it became a common phrase in our house. Story 138. My dad said, it's better than a poke in the eye with a burnt stick. Story 139. You destroy everything. All you ever do is destroy. You're not capable of loving me or anything. And my personal favorite. Life's a bitch and then you die. Story 140. When my parents talked about me, they would call me the boy. Example, what is the boy going to do this weekend? Did the boy do his chores? The boy wants to go as well. Story 141. My mom had a lot of sayings. I'm going to blister your bottom was one. Snatch me bald-headed was another. My great aunt used to say, I'll be Johnny. Story 142. Laugh out loud. I heard the line I brought you into this world and I can take you out a few times. Macabre. Story 143. I should just hit your face. It was more effective in my parents' language. Dad never hit me, but the threats were scary. They were still effective. I am in my 30s and deaf now, laughing out loud. I know that is what he was saying. It is like his catchphrase. Story 144. God damn it. Next time you want to double your money, fold it in half and put it back in your fucking pocket. Story 145. My dad used to tell my brother and me when we messed up, it's just common sense. One night at dinner he mentioned it again. I looked him in the eye and said, common sense doesn't exist. Everything you call common sense was either taught to you or learned the hard way. My brother's eyes lit up and my dad searched for an example. I asked, when you were a child, did you just know to look both ways before crossing the street? Or did someone tell you? Or did you nearly get hit and then learn to look both ways? Remember when Stephen put keys in an outlet because he thought it was an ignition and got thrown back a foot and a half? He never did that again. To this day, I believe my dad is still trying to find something that truly counts as common sense. Story 146. You may be an adult, but I can still put you up for adoption, my mom said after I used a swear word in front of her. That wasn't fair because my older brother can swear all he wants. Story 147. If I lost something and was looking for it, my dad would ask, does your number feel funny? Story 148. My parents were dicks. Be seen, not heard. And every other boomer line that says, I hate you and I made you to do slave labor. Story 149. If someone looks in a bad mood, ask who upset them. Story 150. I know your father was a pain, but you're not made of glass, even if I were blocking the television. Story 151. Così duzo tenistro, also known as too much of anything is unhealthy. It goes to show that everything can be bad, but it is mostly about how far you take it. Story 152. Not my parents, but the mother of my childhood friend. If the weather was a bit chilly or it looked like rain, she urged us to dress more warmly. A light windbreaker was not enough. We needed sweaters and perhaps a babushka. When we refused, she warned that we would catch our death of foolishness. Story 153. Sorry, I cannot assist with content that sexualizes minors. I can clean the rest of the text as requested. There were 2 from my mom. If you cannot find something and do not know where else to look, look in places you would not think of. At the beach or on a hike. She did not bring any water and now the children are thirsty. Do you want me to share my water? Story 154. My favorites from my childhood. Erster German. Der liebe Gott hat einen langen Arm und langt damit die Ecke. English. God has a long arm and he uses it to reach around corners. Zweiter German. Mitgefangen, mitgehangen. English. If you get caught with them, you'll hang with them. Story 155. My dad has so many. When I am slow, he says, it would take you an hour and a half to watch 60 minutes. Story 156. When your eye is irritated and you are rubbing it, and you tell your mother, I have something in my eye, she would say, well, take your finger out of it. Story 157. Anytime I messed up, my dad would tell me, you plan to fail. Story 158. You don't have half a brain between the 2 of you. My mom would shout that at my brother and me whenever we made the kind of rookie mistakes you make the first time you learn to do a chore. It is arguably her most creative insult to our intelligence. Story 159. Whenever someone suggested doing something responsibly, Dad would say, let's not, and say we did. He said it jokingly, but I always respected that attitude. When Mom said she could do something and someone replied, well, so can I, she would answer, soak your own eye. It always guaranteed laughter. Story 160. My grandmother always told us, all liars shall have their place in the lake of fires. Story 161. My dad used to say to my sister, engage neutral before opening your mouth. Story 162. The phrase snowing to beat the band means it was snowing very hard. Story 163. We would say it was the asshole behind me whenever Dad farted. Common sense is not so common. Find out the facts before you speak. Now that they are older, I find myself telling them this. Story 164. I had to go to speech therapy a lot as a kid, and even when I got older I would still say ax instead of ask. They would always exaggerate ask. It still happens sometimes. Story 165. In response to, how are you doing? Hanging in there like a hair in a biscuit. After eating a lot of food. I'm fuller than a tick after a 3-day suck. Story 166. Every choice is a sacrifice. Oddly, choosing to go back to school after having a good job helps me through tough times. Knowing that what happens is the result of my choice is comforting. Story 167. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, give me strength with these kids. Story 168. You can ask for what you want. You may or may not get it. Story 169. Every time we were going to get in the car, my mom would say, ready, Freddy? I have now adopted that into my own vernacular. I am almost 40 years old and do not have children. Laughing out loud. Story 170. Keep asking what's for dinner and you'll eat horse shit and heifer dust. We asked our mom that repeatedly even after she had told us. Story 171. The horn works. Now try your lights. My dad said this every time he heard a car use its horn inappropriately. Story 172. Turn off that light. We don't own stock in the electric company. He thinks his last name is Rockefeller. You're not going out looking like somebody's lost child. My mother is very quotable. Story 173. I will give you something to cry about, said as you are bawling your eyes out. Story 174. The phrase if you go in for luxuries was used when I complained about being a parent. It meant, essentially, that because you had sex, parenthood was the consequence. Story 175. One habit I am really hoping my children carry on from me is to close their mouths when they are chewing. No one wants to see tomorrow's poo. Story 176. If we were bored, Mom would tell us, go count your toes. Story 177. If you had a brain, you'd be dangerous, someone said every time I did a silly thing as a child. Story 178. My dad loved saying cheese whiz and biscuits. Life lesson when he gave important advice. Liar because I went into law and he was very proud. and feeling some type of way, meaning being in an emotional or mental state depending on the context. It has been a bit over 3.5 years since I could hear those. An original poster, you made me miss them again. I needed to remember them, so thank you. My pop, my father's father, came from Jamaica, so he said lickle instead of little and asked for ice-cold water in a distinctive way. He also had a particular way of sneezing. My aunt, my dad's sister, recently said happier than a pig in slop. You got me going down memory lane. Story 179. Cry quietly. It was a very loving home, as I'm sure you can tell. Story 180. When asking what's for dinner, my dad would always, without fail, answer, a glass of water and a look around. The day I first said that to my own kids was unexpected. It just slipped out without thinking. Story 181. I'll pin you up against the wall if you're gonna keep being a Mona. Dad, I was 5. The fuck is a Mona? Story 182. Not my parents, but I had a friend who grew up in a more rural part of the same Tennessee county as I did. He grew up poor, and every time he or his siblings badgered their mother to buy them something, the response was always the same. Too fucking bad. Story 183. It's better to be thought ignorant than to open one's mouth and remove all doubt. Story 184. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry for. Followed by a wicked slap to the back of the knees. I was a little bastard at times. Ah, the good old days. Story 185. Use your head for something other than a hat rack. Man, it is hotter than a popcorn fart out here. Story 186. When I was bad, she would say stop it or I am going to give you a licking. Story 187. If you don't work for it, it doesn't shine. Mouth full of gimme and a handful of grab. Give me your keys. I'm putting you on the Shoelace Express. My dad has all kinds of one-liners. Some escape me right now. You just look at him and wonder, what actually goes on in your head? Laughing out loud. But they mostly made sense. Story 188. Go piss up a rope. It consistently confuses people for just a moment and I appreciate that. Story 189. Do as I say, not as I do. She was allowed to leave shit around, but if I did, it was World War III. I can't stand the fucking woman. Story 190. My uncle used to say, only boring people get bored. I now know what he meant, and these days I never get bored. Story 191. Let us not and say we did. Thanks, Mom. I just wanted to go to the park. Story 192. Sleep tight. Do not let the bedbugs bite. If they do, grab a shoe and hit them until they are black and blue. Story 193. You should save your cents now as if they were dollars, so when you get to my age you can spend your dollars as if they were cents. Story 194. My mom would say, come on, Mary. Anytime she wanted me to hurry up and go anywhere. My name isn't Mary, and neither is my sister. We still don't know why she said that. Story 195. Shit a brick. I never really thought about it, but when I did, that's hilarious. Story 196. Get yourself off that couch and do what I tell you. My dad was a former Army drill sergeant, so imagine the tone. Story 197. A liar assumes everyone lies. A cheater assumes everyone cheats. A thief assumes everyone steals. Don't count the losses. Count the victories. Story 198. My dad always told me that friends were temporary and that most of them would not be my friends after I turned 40. He was right, but I still have a few great friends, and it took me a long time to see who my true friends were. Story 199. One of the kids is standing in front of the TV and blocking it. Your mom was not a glassmaker. Get out of the way. Story 200. Good, better, best. Never let it rest until the good is better and the better is best. Story 201. Here are a few of the gems. I'll give you something to cry about. Do as I say, not as I do. Want in one hand, shit in the other. See which one fills up faster. I will always love you, but that doesn't mean I like you. Story 202. You are worthless. You cannot do anything right. Your mother left because she did not want you. You know the classics. Story 203. If I have to come back there, someone is going to be sorry. Story 204. Life is a bitch and then you die. It is almost Buddhist if you really think about it, laughing out loud. Story 205. This still hurts, and I use it toward myself in a self-deprecating way. My dad would say, "Love you" to me, and my stepmom would reply, "Someone has to." Now, when someone says, "Love you" to me, that is automatically what pops into my head. Story 206. My dad told me that success was 50% showing up on time and properly dressed for the job. Story 207. Responding with, "So buttons on your underwear," every time someone says, "So." Story 208. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Story 209. My grandpa used to say, "It's raining harder than a cow pissing on a flat rock." Another favorite was my great-grandmother from Mississippi. She always said grease instead of grease. And if one of us kids tried to be sly or play a trick, she would say in her thick accent, "You greasy goats." I still say grease for fun to this day. Story 210. People who love you for the way you are, not despite it. Thanks, Dad. Love you too. Story 211. When making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, my mom would always tell me to use a knife for the peanut butter and a spoon for the jelly because a knife will break it. I have no idea what the phrase "break the jelly" means, and my mom is not around to ask. Rest in peace, but it is stuck in my head for life. Story 212. You're not everybody. Now that she's older and has more time on her hands, I catch myself saying that to her, laughing out loud. Story 213. From the United Kingdom. There are too many lights on. What is this? Blackpool illuminations. Story 214. Why are you crying, boy? Do I need to give you a reason to cry? My father was difficult when he was quitting nicotine. He likely had borderline personality disorder. Withdrawal symptoms and relationship problems with my mother did not help. For funny phrases in response to saying might, as in "I might do that," he would say, "A mite bites a dog's butt," meaning might is a useless phrase. "I don't know" is not an answer. It definitely is, but as a parent I understand why it is annoying. Can't, never, could, meaning if you tell yourself you cannot do something, then you will never be able to. I can't. There's a bone in my leg. He would say this whenever I wanted him to do something that required him to get out of his chair during football. There were more, but these stick in my head the most. Story 215. She told me that my tongue was going to dig my grave someday. I had a smart mouth. She told my sister that she would lose her head if it were not tacked on. My sister was constantly losing things. My mom was not great at gentle parenting. Story 216. My mom used to say, "You are full of soup," when we were being silly. Story 217. Whatever cranks your tractor is my mom's phrase. Better than whatever floats your boat, that's for sure. Story 218. My father used to say, "You know what? He thought he farted, but he shit his pants." Story 219. Shit was apparently my first word because my mom said it so much. An early phrase was "you asshole," which my mom would say to aggressive drivers. Story 220. When I was getting ready for school as a child, my dad would tell me that if I went any slower, I would be going backward. Story 221. Australian Generation X here. There was one phrase my parents used to tell me not to touch something. It is stuck in my head from the first time I reflexively said it to my kids. Get your cotton-pickin' fingers off that. Yeah, I probably should not be saying that. Story 222. If something physically hurt my mother and she deemed it my fault, no matter what it was, she would say, "I'll let you know when it stops hurting." She never let me know when it stopped hurting. Not once. Story 223. To understand is to forgive. It has shaped much of my moral framework and helped ease my anger when people behave badly. I have learned to look for other perspectives and try to imagine why someone might do something I would not. Story 224. Whenever something unfair happened to me, my dad always said, "Them's the breaks," meaning there was nothing that could be done and I had to accept it. The phrase comes from the movie Going South, 1980, where Christopher Lloyd says it. Story 225. My father would say never question him. If he told you that a rooster, when he looks under his wing, is taking a dip of snuff, do not go and look. Story 226. Takes two to tango, is what my dad said when I complained about my older brother beating me. He often wonders why my brother and I were never close, even though he does not speak to his own brother, who used to beat him when he was growing up. Story 227. My grandfather used to say, "Do not try to fool me by telling me it is raining." Story 228. My mom would start to say, "God damn it," but would stop herself and say, "God bless America." Story 229. The morning after a night of drinking, I would go into the kitchen and chug some water. If you knew you were going to be this thirsty, you should have drunk more last night. Story 230. Walk on your own feet. After my son steps on my shoe from behind. Story 231. Every time we got home from somewhere, my mother would sing Home Again, jiggity jig. I found myself saying it a couple of days ago after a long day of driving. Story 232. Bedtime for bozos. I guess this may have come from Bozo the Clown, which was before my time. Now, when I gather my dog to take her to bed each night, I always tell her this and the cycle continues. Story 233. My dad wasn't a man of many words, but when I was a teenager, upset about some friendship drama, he told me something that has guided me ever since. Time is the only witness that matters. His point was that you cannot make permanent statements about temporary situations. People evolve, feelings change, and time eventually reveals the true nature of everything. It taught me to value relationships for what they are in the present, without the pressure of promising forever. Story 234. You could have been a flower, but you chose to be a weed. Story 235. There's nothing worse than an imbecile with initiative. Story 236. When Dad wanted me to leave him alone, he would always say, "Hit the bush." When I grew older, I asked what it meant. He said that when he was young, someone would say, "Hit the prairie," to mean take off running or get lost. But we lived in the suburbs. We didn't have prairies, we had bushes. Story 237. Whenever what I did wasn't good enough, Dad called it half-assed. Story 238. The best child is obedient. Fuck both of them. They just want children they can control without asking questions. Childhood trauma is a bitch. Story 239. Y is a crooked letter and it cannot be straightened. I now know my mom knew nothing, so I don't know was her go-to response when I asked why about almost anything. I have never uttered those words as a parent. I want people to be inquisitive. Story 240. You're carrying on like a mad woman's breakfast or interchangeably like a two-bob watch, used when we were fucking something up or being overly emotional. Story 241. Good night, nurse. They would use it instead of saying geez or good grief. I am not sure where it comes from. Story 242. Tough titties, said the kitty when the milk turned green. Story 243. All women have the same worth, yet some receive diamonds while others accept Taco Bell burritos. Maybe I am overthinking, but know your worth, I guess. Story 244. Your ass is going to be grass. You are cruising for a bruising. Story 245. I wonder what the rich people are up to right now, they said, usually on rare family vacations. Story 246. Are you looking for sympathy? It is in the dictionary, right between shit and syphilis. My father-in-law was not a big fan of people moping around, feeling sorry for themselves. Story 247. Some days you are the bug, some days you are the windshield. Whenever I complained too much about having a bad day. Story 248. When we were kids, we were not allowed to say the word fart because it was considered too vulgar, so my parents called them bucket burps. Story 249. People would say Jesus punishes when they did foolish things and got hurt. Story 250. I am your father, not your friend. If you do not like my rules, you can leave and I will hold the door for you. Story 251. Work smarter, not harder. If you are going to do something, do it right. Story 252. When you are looking for something you have misplaced, people say, it will be in the last place you look. My grandmother, rest in peace, used to say this to my mother, who passed it on to us. Story 253. My uncle from the old country used to say, fall of the year, bad weather. Story 254. One from each parent. Dad, the path to hell is paved with good intentions. Mom, while watching football with poor quarterback play, said that the player could not hit the broadside of a barn door. Story 255. My father would say, if it was so easy, everybody would be doing it. This phrase has saved me many times. Whenever I see a promise of easy money, I hear my father say it. He was wise beyond his years. Story 256. Hurrying doesn't get it done. My stepmother used to say that when I rushed to do something, I often had to redo it. To this day, I remember her warning that cutting corners never turns out right. Story 257. If all your problems could be solved with money, you don't actually have any problems. You just need more money. That didn't make sense to me until I experienced terrible grief, which you can't fix with money, in my opinion. Story 258. Whenever we do well at anything, my dad says, that's a big achievement for Borussia Dortmund's team. Story 259. My mom would say when we pulled into the driveway after a long drive, home again, jiggity jog. When we were upset about something, she would say, suck it up, cupcake. It's time to pull up your big girl panties, because life isn't fair. Story 260. It is not what you say but how you say it, and it is what listeners hear that counts. Story 261. What goes around comes around. Karma. When you point your finger at others, for are pointing back at you on your own hand. People in hell want ice water too. Do you see them getting any? He or she has Cadillac dreams on roller skate wages. This is usually used when asking for something we cannot afford. Is the Pope Catholic? Does a bear shit in the woods? This means it is obvious. Story 262. Ben je boos? Pluk dan een bloem. Zet hem op je hoed en voel je morgen weer goed. If you are angry, pick a flower and put it on your hat, and you will feel better tomorrow. This sounds ridiculous in English, but it made me feel better on many days when life was not fun. Now that she has passed away, I miss this phrase in her voice so much. Story 263. My dad always said this Portuguese saying to my cousins and me when we left to go out. It translates to common sense in your head and your hand over your pussy. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.